welcome back to the Sunday Mannin Line. Now, I'm Roger Watterson, and with me in the studio is Councillor David Christian, MBE JP. He's the council leader and chair of the executive committee of the Douglas Borough Council, and Councillor Claire Wells. She's chair of the housing committee of the same organisation. They were our guests on Sunday Opinion, and now they've joined us for the Mannin Line. So it's time for you to talk to them. I've been doing so for the past hour. It's now your turn. And all you've got to do is telephone us. The number is 66 13 68. You can also text, of course, to 166177, or you can email to studio@manxradio.com. But telephone calls would be nice. It is meant to be a phone-in programme, so 66 13 68. I have to tell you, both of these two guests are rather good at fielding telephone calls. You might like to try them. 66 13 68. There's a couple of calls coming in now as well. So for those of you who are calling, hang on, Catherine will be with you shortly. We talked about properties, by the way, in Strand Street, and I said, well, people used to live there, but now they don't seem to be. Andy has just told me here that there's a planning application for residential above the previous Anne's summer shop.
Very interesting. I've not seen that one. I mean, let's see more of that, because like I say, many of the shops within the shopping area upstairs, some of them may use the first floor for storage, and after that some of them are just lying derelict. Yes. But I think with lots of them it'd be the access that would be the problem now. But no, that's great. Thanks for letting us know.
Can David tell me, these are now texts coming in. We're going to take a break in a moment.
All right, yes.
And Catherine will be answering the phone one. Hopes in a moment.
I think she's gone to make our tea.
Has she? Oh dear, right. Can Gabe tell me, as a Spring Valley resident, when dog owners who are still using the lower field, which is fenced off at great expense, as a dog toilet, oh dear, here there are signs on gates with notice of fines, but we never see a warden or an official to catch them. Just one fine would do the job. Yeah,
it's a real bone of contention. We've had serious issues for the best part of 12 months now within our warden service. People will see there's actually adverts out for 2 posts at the moment to replace people who are retiring and through ill health. So we have been stretched in that area, but we are aware of the Groves Road playing field, and the residents who's raised, it's probably somebody I've spoken to as well. It really grieves us that we've made that investment up there and people are still going in. In fact, we were sent pictures only yesterday of somebody who walked their dog onto Douglas Promenade, and the dog carried on walking and did its business for over 10 metres along the promenade, and the person just carried on walking with it in the lead and done nothing. You know, but obviously we haven't got eyes everywhere, you know. I mean, that's all over Facebook. Hopefully that won't be identified.
Well, we won't get into that subject too much today, but it is very irresponsible dog ownership, isn't it?
It is, and to be honest with you, we've got dog bins all over the place, and also our normal litter bins are able to take dog waste as well, because they're emptied on a regular basis.
With all this newfound CCTV thing that you've got, can you pick this up?
Oh, we can in certain areas. We can. And
I don't mean the dog do it.
No. And there's one at the moment where I came across it in Strand Street, and this is a few weeks ago now, and I'd seen the people passing me further down the street, and when I walked back through the street again, this was early evening, and I seen this pile of mucker that's only come from one area, and that was tracked down through our CCTV. Right. Also with the CCTV, we've had bouts of vandalism in the town. One of them most recently was in relation to our new car park barriers. We put that on Facebook, and the actual parent of one of the people who caused the damage actually came forward and went to the police because they were so horrified at what was there.
Right. Do you give this information to the police then? They use it, do they?
They do. Well, we actually said to the police, can we post this on our site? And within an hour or two of it going on, it got back to the parents, who were mortified, and they went to the police and admitted it. So the CCTV is a very useful tool, because it's not everywhere.
Well, those of you who are calling, thank you for doing so. Catherine is actually answering the switch. I think she's just answered one, and so she's just taken another now, so maybe we'll have a call or two in a moment. And I'll take a break in a minute, but just before I do so, there's a question here that says, over the last 5 years, how many new additional properties have the council built, and how many new additional properties do they plan to build in the next 5 years? Have you any idea of that?
I don't think we've built any, although I think there was maybe a couple up in Williston, if I remember correctly, but I think we may have demolished and then rebuilt.
Yes.
So there aren't any. I have some grand plans, but unfortunately they are just in their infancy at the moment, and we are looking to see what we can do, because we desperately need to do something in our town centre, and we're going to need some additional ones. So we are looking at it, and we'd really like to, but again, it's all investment and money.
There are some additional properties that came in as part of the Pull Rose development, because obviously we demolished a number of houses and put more apartments in, so the housing stock increased slightly there with some new buildings, but otherwise there's been no major scheme, but there are one or two on the drawing board at the moment.
What do you do about then when somebody is in a house, like you've got an elderly woman in a 3-bedroomed house and she's been there for 25 years, 30 years?
Yeah, so it's a difficult thing, because we're not in a position where we can just say to them, right, you're now at the point that you have to move out. But the other problem is that one of our biggest waiting lists at the moment is our 1 and 2 bedroom properties, and we just don't have any to move them out to. So we were looking at a scheme in Williston where we were going to do a sheltered accommodation. That was unfortunately not supported by the DOI, but I think actually to our advantage to a certain degree, because we've gone back and we've looked at it again, and we have different plans for that site now, which I think would help and alleviate that particular problem.
Okay, now we've got quite a lot of texts and emails coming in at the moment, so before we get into quite a number of them all, let's take a break. And welcome back to the Sunday Mannin Line. With me in the studio is David Christian and Claire Wells, both from the Douglas Borough Council. What's the difference between the Douglas Borough Council and Douglas Corporation, David? I always get them all up.
We are incorporated as a local authority, so it's Douglas Corporation, but a number of years ago, because we are a borough as well, we determined that Douglas Borough Council was more in keep with what people understand. Corporation, you'd be talking about a business. Well, we are a business in many ways as well, I suppose, but we felt to denote it was Douglas Borough Council's name most people use.
It's always known euphemistically by as always the Corpy otherwise.
Oh, we still get that now. We still get that from members.
Right. Now, a couple of callers on the line, but I'll deal with that very quickly. The first one, just after I say that Kay wants to know why the local authority, that you, won't let Tesco expand its floor space, as the store is not going away and it's used by all island residents.
Tesco's a number of years ago put in a planning application. I think it was to build at the top end of the store. It was to put a mezzanine level in, and I think if I remember right, it was to create another level of car parking as well. But at that time, it was looking at selling white goods and also clothing, and I think there was a general feeling amongst a lot of people that that was just going to detract from other stores who were trying to provide a business. It wasn't expanding what they've got. I mean, I personally feel the store as it is now, it's at capacity, and so the food range, yes, but other elements, what impact will it have on the rest of the businesses here?
The very thing you're talking about before.
Yeah.
Right.
But it is a difficult one. I can understand where people come from. We're all human.
Right. Now, let's take our first caller who's on the line, and it's Howard. Good afternoon, Howard.
Good morning, Roger. Good morning, guests.
Hi, Howard.
Hello, David.
Hi, Howard.
The question specifically for you. Don't tremble. I'm in a good mood this morning.
Oh, that's good, Howard.
I quite agree with you just from that last question about Tesco's. This is going outside my question. I've seen in one area where Tesco's moved in and they actually decimated the whole of the area with the small shops, and that they're still closing down now, the shops, because they cannot cope.
That was some of the research we certainly did at the time through the Douglas Development Partnership, and that was a real concern we had, and people that were in those type of businesses of white goods and clothing did make strong representation to us to say, look, there is no way could we possibly compete, we'll be gone.
We've been through this system once before with the other supermarket that moved onto the island 30, 40 years ago, and that had a detrimental effect on the town of Douglas. To have the same thing happen now in this day and age with a huge conglomerate like Tesco, I have to admit I use Tesco, but it would certainly make a mess of the town of Douglas.
Yeah, and I think the other thing we've got to be very careful of as well, because I mean, I keep hearing people saying about an Aldi or a Lidl coming here as well, but would that be to the detriment of that other supermarket on the island who's got, is it 10 or 12 stores around the island, so we could end up with one store in Douglas or in the outskirts and possibly lose other stores, and that would not be good.
I keep asking this question, David. You may know, I don't know if it's been resolved, but I always ask the question about what do we do about the tax for these companies. Manx companies pay, at the time, at that level of business, were paying tax.
Yeah.
And the UK ones were doing it under the double taxation agreement, and we didn't get much.
That's right.
So now, I don't know if that's been resolved. Would you know?
I wouldn't know at all, no.
Okay. Right.
Anyway, Roger,
Yes,
my question is, it's directly to David there, because he's been in the borough, the council, for many, many years. Now, I'm a lot older than you, David, so I think in the back of my mind somewhere that the council, the borough of Douglas, used to have what they called bonds.
Yes, that's correct.
Now, I don't know whether they're still in existence or whether they phased out, or there's any thought of introducing them again, because in this present time, with the bank rates for savers being so very low, it could be an attractive format to bring money in. Although I know you can borrow money yourselves from the banks at a very low rate for all your schemes. But the money coming in there would give the savers something. It would keep the money on the island and also give you groundwork to go and do what bits and pieces you want to.
Yeah, a number of years ago, Howard, bonds were discontinued throughout all local authorities on the island because the government entered into a scheme with the then Mannin Bank to offer loans to all local authorities. And because the majority of loans that we were taking out was in relation to housing, and of course the government or the taxpayer meets the deficiency payments on housing, we had to be part of this overall scheme to get the favourable rate. So bonds were discontinued. That system is no longer with the Mannin Bank, it's with HSBC. It's for a shorter period of time, so in fact it's probably getting pretty close towards review. But I know many people, and I've had it from several members of the council, would like to see bonds issued again. And I said in the earlier programme, I can remember older people around the town saying that they felt that their money was safe loaning it to a local authority, but they also felt they were doing a little bit to help the town as well by handing that money over. And of course you benefited from a higher interest rate.
The banks at the moment, some of them are teetering, some are just keeping going, and some are walking on tiptoes. But with the likes of the Manx government, who financially back these things in a sense, the money is going in. It's more almost like what they've been fighting for the last couple of years, a credit union.
Yes, yes, you're correct.
And this is the local money going into bonds to help the island and not have to borrow off English banks.
I think you'd find, Howard, there'd be a lot of support out there for what you're saying.
I'm sure there would. In fact, it's even been suggested government should.
It has now, yes, that's correct.
Okay, Howard, well, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Anne.
Cheers, Howard.
Bye-bye. That was Howard. We'll go to another caller in just a moment. But first of all, can I just go to... Roger, could you please ask your guests why they have to charge 6% extra for paying rates monthly when the base rate's only 1.2% or 1.2% or 1 to 2%? Why you have to charge 6% extra for paying rates monthly?
I don't know.
Did you know that? There was a silence from you both there.
I'm not aware anybody does pay 6% more. Your rates bill is your rates bill, and we give you a period of time to pay it over. You can get a discount of 3.5% if it's paid by the 30th of June, and a lot of people do take that up, and the rates are paid. Then there are a number of people who will pay it over an 8-month period. Right. So, but if the person wants to contact me direct on that, I'll be happy to get any information. I just can't answer it off the top of my head.
Why don't the council offer houses to tenants on a rent-to-purchase scheme, freeing up capital to build new houses?
Many years ago this was proposed. I think it was just before I went into the council. A questionnaire went out around, and it actually went around the Pulrose estate. Now, as everybody knows, the whole of Pulrose has been redeveloped, and they were asking people would they be interested in buying those prefabricated houses in Lower Pulrose, and the price they were being quoted was full market value, and bearing in mind some of those people had lived there then 50 or 60 years. And of course they got it back at a resounding no. Now I'm led to believe it was pretty much a Labour council at that time, and that was the answer they wanted back. And it's never been considered again. I don't think there's been any approaches from government to introduce it.
No, but I think the other problem you have with that is then you'll have, you could have 4 houses in a row, 2 of which are then privately owned and 1 of which, 2 of which aren't. And then it's trying to manage that is a big task. So I think personally, I think it would be too difficult to try and manage something like that.
Having said that, you get 4 people in a row, all different owners. And it's not usually an issue, is it? And you can. I mean, I live in a terrace and I only own one house. There's people either side of me, so.
I just think from a management point of
we
view,
cooperate,
it's quite good. It's good management to keep all your houses in one place.
Well, I suppose, yeah.
And of course, we've still got a growing housing list as well. We've still got a considerable number of people on the housing list. So the more we take out of the system,
you take out at one price and have to build new at another.
Yeah. So unless you can actually, if you're not selling at market value, straight away we're increasing deficiency payments because we need to pay the full price to build more.
Okay. Right. We have another lady on the line now, and it's Fenella. Good afternoon, Fenella.
Good afternoon. I'm ringing about some years ago, there were several housing schemes where you bought your house off the government. They built 2 or 3 quite large estates here and there. We bought one in Ballinarwen, and one of the things they said was if you were moving out of a council house or an LGB house, then you would definitely get a house. So, be able to purchase one.
Yes.
And that was quite a good idea. There were mostly on Ballinarwen, it was young couples, and lots of them split up. But there was a good few people on it who had come out of LGB houses or council houses, and they stayed a long time.
Yeah, there's been several of those schemes, Fenella. I mean,
Yes,
in mine and Claire's constituency, we've got Harcroft
Yes,
estate,
I
which
know
was the
there's
old
several.
MEA site. Now, quite a few people did move out of council houses into those properties. There was conditions put on those for how many years they had to stay there before they could sell, and I think that put a bit of a noose around some of their necks. But the council was one of the first ones some 30-odd years ago now, at the top end of Annika with the Norwest House houses, where we built over 100, and they were first-time buyers, and we actually gave the plot, I think it was for 1 pence at the time, to encourage people to get into first-time buyers.
Although first-time buyers now, there's quite a general amount available through the
There is.
developers, isn't there, around the island? But the biggest problem they have is getting the deposit together.
It is now. It is. It is.
That's the inhibiting
And also, you
factor.
do get backlash from the second-time buyer now as well. The people are moving on. They're saying, well, all this assistance being given to the first-time buyers.
So
but
are you
we need
still
some
in your
assistance.
first-time buyer's house, Fidela?
No, we're not. We've moved since. But we were in it well over 7 years, which was the condition. I think we were in there 15 years, actually. The condition was that you had to live in it for 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
But if you moved out of... I mean, you needn't do such big schemes, but if they did smaller schemes and said, well, anybody... They could do a survey, find out if people would be prepared to buy a house and move out of their council house, and then those council houses would be freed up to be refurbished or whatever they want to do with them, and then you could get more people in.
Well,
I think this is
cool.
where the 5-year tenancies are going to come into their own, because people will be encouraged, to save up over those 5 years so that they can go into a first-time buyer's house. But the first-time buyer's house is obviously a government scheme as opposed to a council scheme. But hopefully the 5-year schemes will the 5-year tenancies will encourage first-time buyers to save up, and that will give them the opportunity to save their deposits.
Okay, right. Well,
That
Fenella?
sounds good. That sounds a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
As I say, but I thought at the time it was a very good scheme because we were able to buy a house, and you did get the plot for next to nothing. I can't remember what it was, but it was quite, it was like a very small amount.
Well, when you go back to this time, of course, Fenella, you're going back to the time when mortgages from banks were a bit hard to find, and the government used to have a loan scheme for up to about £10,000, I think, at the time as well.
Well, we got a government mortgage, and we paid 8% for that.
Yeah.
But we stayed on that for a little while, but then we changed over and got a different mortgage because everybody round us was saying, haven't you changed your mortgage? You can get it for 3%.
Oh, that's a big difference, isn't it?
Yes, we did.
Okay,
But,
Fenella.
I mean, while you were paying that 8%, the government was doing very nicely, so they were in it made them in a better position to help other people that needed it.
Right. Fenella, thank you for joining us.
Right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Right, now what else have we got here? Let's have a look. We've got quite a few texts and emails been coming in. We've dealt with the one about council houses. One's grumbling about the fact that you can't afford a living wage in your own business, but he says, no problem in swinging the same burden onto the ratepayers. There in miniature is the difference between public and private sector.
No, I can understand where that person's coming from. And I knew when I said it was going to be controversial, but I can honestly turn around and say that over I think it's the last 6 years, we've had wage increases imposed on us for all our workers. That's a total to 9.6%. A couple of the years it's gone to arbitration, and we have to give those last year was 2.3% wage increase, and we have to adhere by those rules. Working in the private sector, I can honestly say my income for the last 9 years has gone down year on year.
Oh, I think we're all working harder for less.
Yeah, that's the reality of what's out there, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
And because I'm in the contract cleaning business, that's one area, because particularly of office developments that have shrunk, they're looking to reduce values of contracts. So if that's gone down, you can't suddenly turn around and say, well, you're going to pay that, because you wouldn't be able to run the contract.
What are or people would be out of a job too.
Exactly, yes.
What are the costs of Williston Estate refurbishments? What is now this is an interesting comment here. What is the increase in life expectancy of the properties? Why are they taking out windows that are supposed to have a 25-year lifespan?
Okay, so they're not replacing the windows, it's just replacing the outer leaf of the properties and taking out the insulation that was there. And they're also taking out the chimney stacks, and the total investment in that in Williston is £35 million, and we're looking at an extra 25 to 30 years on those properties. And we've already had very positive feedback from people who are going back into those houses, saying that their heating costs have gone down, so the houses are a lot more efficient than they were before. So it's breathing a lot of fresh air into that. And even if you drive through the estate, it's amazing if you look from one to the other how different it looks. It really is a good investment and it is our largest housing estate.
But obviously, if you're investing in it, over a period of time, you expect it to last
Yeah.
for what, 10, 20 years? What is it?
Well, so we said between 25 and 30 years
right, okay.
is the life expectancy. And I think that's one of the very first things I said when I stood in council was about the fact that, you need to make sure that when you're spending money, it's going to last. And one of the things I said in my address on Wednesday was we need to invest, and the investment needs to outlive the loan. And that's very important to me, because the last thing I want to be doing is paying for something, 15, 20 years down the line that 5 years ago we then started replacing again. It's just, it's not good economy.
And if we didn't go down this scheme, Roger, the replacement cost of Wilson Estate, 'cause there's over 730 houses, was in excess of 125 million. And that sort of money is just not available, I'm afraid.
No. Right, faster my, says Andrew. Can your guests please say now this is a mixed question. Can your guests please say how many borough wardens there are, how much the total salary cost is for that department? Well, I don't want to carry this in your head, but there we go. How many wardens are currently on long-term sick leave? Who decides on the benchmark for the borough wardens department's effectiveness? What is that?
Right, well, we obviously have the wardens team. There's been borough wardens, and there's also been car park attendants who have actually come into that warden team as well to boost it. So they've got dual roles within that. We have had, during the course of last year, long-term illness. That can happen in any organisation. And we also have a retirement, I think, early this month as well. So there are currently 2 posts being advertised. The figures I certainly couldn't quote off the top of my head, because I wouldn't want to misinform somebody.
Effectively, what he's saying is, what do the wardens do?
Well, they're there to enforce bylaws, but also over the last 3 or 4 years, they've been doing various different jobs for the committees. So we've just had a full review done by a director of regeneration, who is now going to be pulling them right back to an effective and efficient warden service. So they are going to be out, it is going to be high vis, they're going to be on the streets enforcing the bylaws as they are. Unfortunately, there's been calls on them from housing, for example, to go around and see difficult tenants or drop letters off and all that. That's not what the job is about. Okay. So there are going to be benchmarks. There are benchmarks now, but with the new team coming in, the structure is changing. But if Andrew wants to drop me an email, I'm happy to give him the other information.
Now, we have another caller on the line. It's Tristram. Now, I think I know what Tristram wants to talk about. So perhaps we should take a break first before we get into that, because it might take us a minute or two. We'll be with you shortly, Tristram. Welcome back to the last part of today's Mannin Line. With me in the studio are councillors David Christian and Claire Wells from the Douglas Borough Council. And as I said earlier on, they're here to talk to you, and the number to ring is 66 13 68. You can text to 166177 or email to studio@manxradio.com. Now, poor old Tristram, I should say, has been waiting on the line for a little while now to talk to us. Good afternoon, Tristram.
Good afternoon, Roger. Good afternoon to your guests. Thank you for taking the call. I make no apology for this. This is quite a heavy technical one, but it's about a new public consultation. There's a whole lot of consultations out just now, but one of them's a really big deal, and it's the new data protection bill.
Right.
Okay. Now, this is something that the UK and the Crown dependencies has to have in place to satisfy EU law by the end of May this year. And we've come late into it in the game. Channel Islands have already got their legislation sorted, and it's being debated in great detail, by Westminster at the moment. The Cabinet Office has rewritten this EU legislation in the public consultation, and it's a monster. It's the biggest I've ever seen. They've turned 264 pages of UK legislation into 374 pages of regulations for the Isle of Man.
Right, isn't it?
And they're doing something quite different, which is, instead of putting it through as normal legislation, which gets debated and amended in the Keys and Legco, etc., it's all going to come through in one lump as a set of regulations.
Well, as an order to an existing act?
There's a short bill of primary legislation, and then that says there's going to be regulations, and there's a whole host of it. Now, what it means is they come to it late in the day, that it's going to get laid before Tynwald for approval. It's very difficult for them to amend this, and it's very complicated, but I've had a look through it, and obviously, I've taken interest in it over the years. I know what to look for, and I found one very obvious problem with it, which I'd like to tell you about.
Please do.
Okay, the obvious part of any law is it applies equally to everybody, and that's exactly the same with data protection. Now, the current legislation, which is going to be effectively nullified at the end of May, allows the Information Commissioner to enforce the data protection law if anybody abuses it, if anybody breaks the law. And that obviously applies equally to government and business, anybody who's broken data protection law. But when I looked through it, I found deep in the regulations that actually there's a single one-liner in it which appears to let the government off the hook if it abuses personal data. And it simply says, and it's a single statement on regulation number 153, that neither a department nor a statutory board is liable for prosecution. So what that means, and I've looked at it and I've very carefully turned it inside out, upside down, means that a company could be prosecuted for something that the government department couldn't be prosecuted for.
That's a strange principle, isn't it?
That's a fairly major change.
It is, isn't it? I mean, it's a constitutional principle there.
Well, you would have thought so. You would have thought so. Now, I wouldn't like to hint as to whether I think it's a mistake or it's a deliberate interpretation of it. I don't know, but my point is that this looks odd, and I think that all the companies on the island whose international reputation stands on having this new set of rules, clear set of rules, I think that they need to take a good look at it and see whether they're happy with it, because it looks on the face of it like the law is not equally applied.
Well, look, as far as it's concerned, though, your point at the start intrigues me. If there's a European law by the time it gets to this stage of being incorporated into domestic legislation, usually it's been round the block quite a few times before it gets to that, and the UK have done the same. How on earth can we make it a third bigger?
Sorry, how we can make it a third what?
A third bigger than the UK or Europe?
Well, it's very detailed, complicated legislation. The United Kingdom has put it through as one big piece of primary legislation. It started in the House of Lords. It's currently going to the Commons. They have said it's the most complicated thing they've ever dealt with. Martha Lane Fox, who founded lastminute.com, said it's almost too complicated for her. They are struggling with it. But I understand the Channel Islands have actually got it all sorted. We've come to it late in the day, and there's very little time to do anything about it if there's a problem with it.
Right.
There may be other problems, but to be honest, it's above my pay grade as a member of the public to go through it. I think the companies need on the island run a fine tooth comb over it and see whether they're happy.
Right. So you're flagging up a warning flag, are you?
Yeah. Because they've done the way they've done it. It's so late in the day that it's going to be very difficult to correct, and it has to be in place under EU law, which obviously we're still subject to, by 25th of May this year. So it's very late in the day, but most of it goes through as regulations. That just gets laid before Tynwald. You can't have a debate and amend it.
No, quite. Well, yes, but you can't piecemeal it either on that basis, either all or nothing when you do it that way. This would apply to the Douglas Corporation or the Douglas Borough Council, wouldn't it, Tristan?
Well, it applies to anybody who processes personal data under the Data Protection Act.
But
so
would the exemption cover the Douglas Council?
It's simply, as I understand it, it's anybody who's on the register of data controllers. So on that basis, if Douglas Council is a registered data controller, and you can find that out quite easily, internet search, then it applies. Whether it says neither a department nor a statutory board. So is Douglas Council a statutory board?
Is it, David?
Well, we're a local authority. I've written that down, and it's Regulation 153, because I'm going to check on that tomorrow, because we have a specific officer that deals with data protection within the council, and also the new Freedom of Information, which is coming from January as well. And we also have a subcommittee that looks at all the consultations that comes out. So 3 members with the relevant staff sit down, they go through it all, and then report to my committee. But this is the first I've heard of this, but I'll be looking to see just how we stand on this one.
David, when you look at it, you go on the website and you'll see 5 documents under the consultation, and it's in the one that says implementation implementing regulations, and it's number 153. It's quite easy to find. But that's what it says, so somebody needs to come out and explain it. I mean, the thing is that there's a lot of regulation going through at the moment. There's another one in the finance sector called MiFID II, which is very complicated and I gather not very popular. But the Isle of Man trades internationally all over the world, and it needs a clear set of rules, like the Channel Islands and like the UK, to trade on. So if there's something awry with it, I think it should be looked at and explained either by the relevant minister or the information commissioner.
How long has the public got to respond to this?
There's only a month left.
Right. Okay.
I was just going to ask that question when
Right,
the
all right.
deadline.
Okay,
Yeah.
Tristan, I thank you for that. I don't think we take much further at the moment, but I do appreciate your input today, and thank you for calling us.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Right.
Well, there we are. That's a different one.
It's a very heavyweight subject, it certainly is, but a bit concerned if it is just going through by regulation, though, rather than giving the members of the House and Tynwald as an overall body the opportunity to discuss it.
We all have seen it, but there's a complicated thing, and the voices, tea's coming, and the voices cry agreed.
Yeah.
It's afraid it happens, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's too easy. Orders are too easy.
Yes.
It really, this is the sort of thing that should be gone through clause by clause. That's the job of the Legislative Council, I might add.
Oh, yes. Well,
Okay.
have a few new members in there shortly as well, by the sounds of it.
Yeah, possibly. Well, yes, not just possibly, there will be.
Will be, yes. Yeah.
I don't know whether our next guest, Steve, will be one of them. Good afternoon, Steve.
There you go. Who would know? Good afternoon, Roger, and good afternoon, panel.
Good afternoon.
Three quick points, if I could make them. Number one is the bylaws. I heard you speaking before about them. Is there seems to be an ongoing problem with wheelie bins in the streets of Lower Douglas, and I wonder, is there any impetus we can get to tackling that? The second issue is I know you're all speaking also about the issues of older properties and the maintenance of them and the improvement of them. I wonder, do the councillors support, and would they support, the reintroduction of grants for owner-occupiers of older properties who, like yourselves, are struggling to find the money to maintain and upkeep them and improve to modern-day standards? And the third, but most important for me, is what views do you have on the importance of open spaces within the town of Douglas? Now, in my area, my local, the nearest open space I can go to and enjoy is Finch Hill Bowling Park. And it's an open space that we can go and sit in and enjoy. And I know that the Eastern Area Plan, there was a proposal that this become part of a larger development. Now, if that was the case, then the people of Lower Douglas would be denied an activity park, for want of a better description, rather than somewhere you can just go and sit. It's an activity park that is within easy walking distance of the people it represents. So I'd be interested to hear your views on those 3 points, if you could, please.
Yeah, Steve, we value our open spaces. You can see the amount of investment we have on our squares around the town. It doesn't seem to matter how much we put in our budget each year for Parks Department. We never get any criticisms. Finch Hill, you're quite correct. When the first submissions come forward, somebody put forward that whole area should be zoned for residential. We were firmly opposed that and made it quite clear we'll fight it tooth and nail. So we'll be not supporting losing the Finch Hill site. Grants for older properties, I would fully support the reintroduction, because one of the biggest headaches we've got around the town at the moment is dilapidated properties and the long drawn out action that we have to take to try and get something done. We have had some success last year. We've had over 100 taken off our list, but you've hit the nail on the head. People in private houses are struggling. So I think some sort of grant system would be welcome. And wheelie bins, the bylaws are there. We've been disappointed as elected members that it's not been enforced enough. We have been hitting certain areas around the town, certain back lanes. We are having some success. The message is getting across there not to be left out. But I think when the new team is in place, it's one of those things that will be hit.
Thank you.
Okay, Steve. Well, I'm sorry to rush you now, but we've got 4 minutes to go and the texts are tumbling in. But thank you for calling us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Right, now, yes, there's one here now which has just come in on our old subject. Stuart Mackenzie. Just for the record, I agree absolutely with Tristan over this planned exemption. So that's one straight comment there. Could the rents be set at a higher rate, say £200, and a discount paid to low-income householders on their proof of income, says Tom?
I think that's got to do with the 5-year tenancy, and that's what's going to come in. So once your tenancy is reviewed after 5 years, your income will be reviewed, and one of the options is to pay a higher rent. What that will be, we haven't been told yet. You'll have the option to pay a higher rent or to go into private sector rent.
Excuse me. Please may I ask why you allow tenants to let their property to become such a dreadful state with gardens full of rubbish? You're making a lovely job with the refurbishing, but these people make an estate a slum.
Yeah, it's a really difficult one. It's difficult to manage with the sort of workforce we have. We have got tenancy agreements in place, but as I'm sure you're aware, we have people on low incomes, and I think having a bit of estate pride is something that we're trying to bring back into to Douglas, and we'll be tackling it that way.
Yet again, the brewery has increased the price of beer. Every time there's a price increase, less people frequent their establishment. I've noticed the frequency of holiday visitors comments that could comment on the cost of a drink. Government is trying to encourage the tourist industry, and the brewery is trying to destroy it.
Oh, yeah.
Well, okay.
Don't really know what we can say about that.
Although I am told that beer and so on is quite expensive.
Yes.
For those who it doesn't take much to spend a few pounds, do we? Do we get a discount when paying our rates monthly?
Not when paying them monthly, no. To get the discount of 3.5%, they should be paid by the 30th of June.
Can you ask David why residents on the Isle of Man are paying all 4 amenity sites to dispose of TV sets and fridges? It's the only jurisdiction in Europe that charges people.
Yeah, again, we were advised by the DOI, who actually run that side off it, that a charge had to be incorporated. The DOI were picking up the cost before, of course. They've had their budgets cut. It's now been passed on to the 4 civic amenity sites.
It's a direct cost to us, as opposed to something that we impose on people. We are charged to do it, so we
the
have
question
to pass
needs
the
to be
charge
asked of the DOI then.
Yeah.
In that
Yeah.
case,
So we have to pass the cost on.
How can someone who sold their house for over £250,000 move into a sheltered accommodation?
Well, that's got to do with how much income they have. The sheltered accommodation is dealt with slightly differently to standard council housing, and that was changed just recently to accommodate people who need sheltered housing. There is a cut-off. Off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you what that cut-off is, but there is a cut-off of how much income you can have. But sheltered accommodation is dealt with very differently to standard council accommodation.
Do you think the proposed new threshold to be eligible for social housing is fair, or does it propagate a new profligate generation of great expectations with minimum effort? This is notwithstanding why many people on a lower income deserve help. Says Jeff.
Well, I think that the legislation hasn't changed yet. That has just gone out to consultation, so it hasn't come in. I don't think it's unrealistic, but I think it's about changing people's perceptions. And I think we touched on it very briefly earlier on about the fact that we need to change the idea that if you get a council house, it's for life. That isn't the case anymore. It is a case of you will be assessed on a regular basis to ensure that you are within the thresholds.
What do you feel about all the car parking spaces getting lost with the new prom scheme and the impact on the shops? Where do cars park? It's hard enough to get parked now. Says Sean.
Yeah, no, there is a genuine concern about the loss of space, as obviously we're trying to create a far better environment on the promenade. We haven't even managed to touch that subject today, but we are trying to create a far better environment down there. There is still capacity within Chester Street car park, and also we are looking at the possibility of a further multi-storey car park in Rear Market Street, and I think there could also be proposals somewhere around the bus station site that could be creating more car parking spaces as well.
Now, we're right at the end of the programme. We've got 36 seconds to go. I'm going to try and get one more in. Roger, by fitting gas in all our new refurb properties, you're giving tenants no choice. They're stuck with highly priced gas, says William.
It's about economies of scale. And I think the last time I was on here, the question was asked about why we're fitting gas if oil's cheaper. And it is about having efficient boilers. The boilers are a lot more efficient now than they were before. And it's economies of scale. So because we were looking at so many properties and we have to service them all, if we had all different boilers in them, then it would cost us an awful lot more to look after.
And that's it. And there we go, right at the end of the programme. David Christian, MBE, JP, he's the councillor and the council leader and chair of the Executive Committee at Douglas Borough Council, and Councillor Claire Wells, who's chair of the Housing Committee. Catherine Nicholl was on the switch. I'm Roger Watterson, and from all of us until next week, goodbye.